welcome to Ladies Talk Show. This is your host, Alicia Hudgen, and I am interviewing James Ingram, a political figure, political advocate. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And where are you from?
I'm from Akron, Ohio.
Oh, okay. How you like LA?
So far, so good. Been out here 6 years, and
Oh, wow.
the weather I can get used to.
Right. Okay, I bet so, coming from Ohio, huh?
No, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to ask you some political issues since that's your arena. What are some strategies we can use to decrease school shootings?
All right, so there are a lot out there that a lot of people have been already trying to implement. There's one, I don't know if you heard about the clear backpacks. There were people who tried to do clear backpacks. There were the example that they set, which was one entrance to a school, one entrance. There was also one that Florida just passed, which is the arming teachers. So teachers now in Florida have guns, or are allowed to have guns. There's all kinds of scenarios, but for me, when I think about it, and it's controversial, all of the examples are controversial, but one that I think will help is metal detectors.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about TSA,
Right.
and when we go to the airport, how do we prevent people from getting on the planes without, with guns?
Mhm.
You have to go through some kind of screening process.
Right.
They go to the extent of you having to take off your shoes and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But if you have to walk through something and so that the security can make sure you don't have anything on you, I mean, that's probably one of the best preventions that you can think about. Now the controversy comes in when people say it looks like a prison. We don't want our school to look like a prison. But to that, I would say, do you want your school to look like a war zone, full of dead children?
Right.
So it's always give and take. You always
Right.
have to compromise. But I think one of the best implementations we could have is having metal detectors so that students are screened coming in and out of coming in the schools.
Right. And I know some, being that I'm from Florida, but I know there's a lot of some schools do have metal detectors. And I've never understood why they didn't do something as simple as putting metal detectors in schools to begin with.
Another thing they say is
Can't be
it
that
violates the privacy of the student.
Hmm.
But then again, if we're talking about preventing, it's almost like I'll briefly touch on this. It's almost like when they talk about healthcare. Like we want to make sure that every person has healthcare. They don't go after the prevention of maybe getting sick.
Right.
They don't
Right.
talk about the prevention. They talk about solutions. And I think
Right.
looking at prevention. So in that case, it would be eat healthy or whatever it is
Right.
that will prevent you from getting sick more than the average person.
Right.
So in this case, if you want to prevent something, you would want to stop the student or stop the student or the child or whoever it is from coming into school with the
That
firearm.
makes sense, yes. And I also want to say, when it comes to school safety, this is a very important issue because we're talking about our children, other people's children, and safety, needs to be our number one concern. No parent wants to sit there and have to worry, oh, is my child going to come home from school day? Is there going to be a shooting? Or no one wants to get that call.
Right.
You just drop your kids off at school. You expect them to be safe. You don't want, you want to be able to go about your day and know that you'll pick them up from school that evening without any issues. But I was going to say, how do you feel about what about having more armed officers like on this campus?
Armed
Because
officers.
I don't know. Go ahead.
No, well, I would just say armed officers would decrease. I would say the intent of coming on campus with a gun or committing the act of a mass shooting or just a single individual shooting. I think it would decrease it, but it won't prevent it.
Right.
And I think that's where the focus should be on is the prevention of it rather than the reduction of it.
Okay.
But there are instances, like I said, where I'm aware of, at least in Ohio, where they have more police officers at certain schools where there are less, not just less firearms that come into school, but less fights that actually take place. So, yeah, police officers actually have a presence there.
Right. Now, do you think increased officers in school will deter school violence, gun violence in schools?
Also, kind of like what we just touched on, I would say it would definitely decrease violence. Whether it's gun violence, actual violence, it decreases it because the police have a presence that people don't want to get involved with. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that happens too. Like sometimes when people see a figure, a uniformed figure, they're just like, oh no, they don't want to do anything they shouldn't do because they don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. So. And again, I want to reiterate though, it reduces, but it doesn't prevent.
Right. So yeah, I think you're right. We definitely probably need to focus more on the prevention of this gun violence in schools before it gets to the point where, we have to now arm our teachers and things with a gun. I mean, how safe is that too?
Yeah. Because that means that students can still come in there with guns.
Right. Of course.
And then what if, worst case scenario, a couple of students get together, have an idea that they want to have a shootout with the teachers, and now we have a war with the teachers and the students. So like temporary solutions is not that shouldn't be the focus of the end result.
Right. And I don't know. I saw some videos on Facebook which were very disturbing of teachers getting angry at some children that were being disrespectful, and they were body slamming the kid and choking them, and it's like, well, if the teacher's losing control already and they're going to that extreme violence, if that teacher had a gun, I almost am certain that teacher would have put a gun on this kid and possibly shot this kid. And, and what is that doing to our children? So as far as mentally, so I don't know if every teacher should have a gun. Like, are they being screened psychologically and things for, I don't know. Just because you're a teacher don't mean you should have a gun.
Right.
That's just how I feel. But okay, moving forward to the next question. Should we totally ban weapons of mass destruction from the general public? How do you feel about that?
That's a tough one because when you think about like if you're talking about like biochemical or any of those type of weapons, I'm thinking about other countries who have those weapons.
Right, of course.
Now, it would be extremely difficult to get everybody to get on the same accord and to have them actually just do away with their weapons of mass destruction. But in a perfect world, yes, I would definitely say we definitely don't need weapons of mass destruction. But when you think about the possibility of someone like a North Korea or like a Russia or any other country who has weapons of mass destruction who could possibly threaten us with, then at that same time, we have, the same capabilities, if not even more, to retaliate with. So it's like, do we just say, do away with all of them in the sense of we got to get everybody on the same accord, or if you're not going to get rid of them, I'm not going to get rid of them. Like, who's going to set the example, I guess, is the question.
There has to be a standard that everyone goes by. I totally get it. Okay, yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I understand. Now, do you think adding more gun laws will decrease violence in schools, gun violence in schools?
I do not think so. When I think about adding more gun laws, now there's twofold. So it could reduce, again, we're going back to reduction.
Right.
But a criminal, like a lot of people have guns right now without a license. Most of the students who go to school, they don't have a license. They students, they kids. So obviously they don't care about gun laws. A person who's willing to kill somebody, especially if it's a mass murder, and it's like you're going to kill over 4 people. I guess 4 is the limited. That's the minimum number before you can call it a mass shooting.
Right.
So if they're willing to shoot over 4 people or more, I don't think they care about a license. Right. So having stricter gun laws, in a way, could reduce the amount of people who actually commit mass shootings. But at the same time, it's almost putting those who actually have guns and they use them responsibly, it's kind of making them go through more of a tougher time
Right.
getting their license. But at the same time, you got to do what you got to do in order to prevent it. If you feel, if I'm not a lawmaker, so I can't say as if I know how to do that job. But I do think that they have to first really look at it as a whole and not just like, okay, if you have a gun license, or if we put tougher screenings on you, then uh, you may not be able to pass the license test or whatever the case,
Right.
which means you shouldn't have a gun. But does that mean that they won't go and get a gun
Exactly.
still?
Right.
I guess that's the.
Right. And then looking at a lot of these situations when it involves school shootings, I'm noticing that usually it's another student that goes to that school
Mm-hmm.
almost every time. So obviously, these aren't adults. These children are not of age to even buy a weapon or a gun. And at any rate, so they and then I think it was even found in a lot of cases they've ordered them off the internet,
Mm-hmm.
from God knows what country we're shipping them in from,
From
which is
different
not really
countries, from
right,
the
and that's
dark
not really
web.
something we can control. How can we? They're getting their guns on the black market, so
Mm-hmm.
nobody's saying, hey, you have to have a license to buy that. They're just they're trying to make money. So hey, you want to buy it? Here it is, and it could be AK-57. They don't care. If you got the money, you can get it. So like, do you think that there's a way that maybe we can start to be able to control that black market?
Um, I I don't think so. I mean, it will get to a point, and this is all right. Now I'm going to speak in a hypothetical sense what the future may look like. Now, right now, we still have cash. We still have means of being able to pay for things without it being recorded. But let's say 10, 20 years down the line, whenever they come up with this technology, there will be a way where every transaction that you make will be recorded and seen by whether it's your bank, which can be red flagged, the government, which can be red flagged. So the only way truly to prevent any of the black market transactions or the dark web or any kind of illegal activity
Right.
is by having recorded because some people will say this is like NWO talk or Illuminati talk or whatever.
Mm.
But realistically, the only way to prevent it is by having recorded transactions.
Right.
Because if you can buy anything with cash and no one knows that you bought it, you can get away with it. But if you try to buy something right now illegally with a credit card or a debit card, that will raise a red flag, and they will either put a hold on your account or they will come knocking on your door.
Right.
So that's how I see that.
Right. That's a good
The
idea.
only way that I can think of preventing that.
Right. That's a good idea because I was thinking that, well, there's no real way to control what another country's doing offering on the internet. The internet is so vast right now, so it's just hard to really control even of what content that someone's putting on the internet, let alone selling. You really the market is really open to anyone to sell anything they want.
Exactly.
Especially on like Amazon and things like that. So, and I've noticed that there are hundreds of gun laws already, and there's still a lot of mass shootings in schools and gun violence. And now it just doesn't seem to me that adding more gun laws will deter that behavior. It's like it's more of a behavioral thing and almost getting to the point where it's a mental health issue. And that really is not fair to add more laws onto other people that are abiding citizens. So how do you feel about it?
So the way I see that is like the more laws you add on top of the ones that are already in place, the more restrictions there are on those who are trying to get their license. Where the focus should be, I believe, because when you do that, the more laws, pretty much the less rights. It's like it's a balance. It's a seesaw. If I say you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, that means it's going to be this much, and this much more difficult in order to legally have something. In this case, a firearm. So I feel like if they're going to put their focus on something, they should put the focus on what the punishment should be if you have a firearm illegally.
Right.
Now, if I have a firearm illegally and I'm caught with it, I should do whatever amount of time
Right.
or whatever the case. There should be an automatic bare minimum of what your punishment should be if you're.
Right.
And they should increase it to
Right.
deter these people who have guns illegally to possess them. And I think that should be the true focus when it comes to trying to prevent those who have not. Don't put the focus on those who are getting their license to have a gun responsibly. Focus it on those who have a gun irresponsibly and illegally.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I also wanted to bring up another issue. There are about 66,000 missing African American girls in the DC area alone. And I was wondering, do you think that increased officers on the streets would help deter kidnappers?
I do. I definitely think that there will be times when a police officer is just riding by or walking by where there could have been a scenario where a person who was looking to abduct and stuff, whether it's a child or a grown woman or whatever, that would prevent that person from taking that action.
Right.
Whereas if the policeman wasn't around, you know, they would. It kind of goes back to, in a way, will police officers in schools prevent violence?
Right.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. So
Right.
to this one, I would definitely have to say that it would reduce. Obviously, again, it's not going to prevent, but
Right.
It definitely will reduce the amount of kidnappings that are taking place.
Right.
That's a large number, though,
Oh, yeah.
60,000. And that's
Right.
within what time frame?
That's been from like June of 2016 up until now. So it's only been like about almost 3 years. That's kind of
I
bad.
gotta look into that. That's
And
insane.
I did not. Yeah, it hasn't been streaming on the mainstream media, which is another issue. Like,
so that's pretty much saying that over the past 3 years, 20,000 women, black women, were abducted every year.
about around that much, yes. And they're young teenagers, between the age of 12 and 16, between those brackets. And I would never have known it had I not saw it on social media, Facebook of all places. And I googled it and looked it up, and I looked up in the Washington D.C. area. They keep an account of missing girls and everything like that. But I can remember when we were younger, when I was a kid, they put missing girls' faces on the milk cartons and things like that all the time. It just seems like you don't really see too much of that anymore. So I was just wondering, like, is there a way, like, maybe if we put it out on the mainstream media more, and these kidnappers see that it's getting more media attention, that it would deter them from, like, maybe they would think twice about, you know, being out there taking girls, because then they have to wonder, okay, somebody's looking for this girl, I got to get rid of her. So.
Yeah. So when I was on I was on the speech team at the school I go to, Los Angeles City College, and at the tournaments there was one woman who had a topic of, there were these bracelets, and they were like rape/kidnap bracelets,
Right.
and they are already in existence. Like somebody already created them or invented them, but it's pretty much like you have this bracelet on, right? And whenever you are attacked or kidnapped or anything of that nature, all you got to do is just pull this little thing, and it automatically sets off a trigger, which pretty much locates wherever you are, and the police come to you. It's not like, obviously, it's not like in mass production or anything, but people are taking steps. That's why, I don't know if you are familiar, but a lot of people right now are actually talking about chipping their children. And and the law, I believe Congress just passed. I will have to double check this, so don't quote me on this, but I do believe Congress just passed a bill that asks for the chipping of those who are disabled. So if you're a disabled person, they're asking to put like a microchip either in you or in a device that you wear, and they're looking to, there's a few things. It has your health information on there. They'd be able to track you GPS-wise if you get lost, or so when you go to the doctor, or let's say a police officer approaches you or anybody approaches you, they can scan your chip and see what kind of person they're dealing with, so that policemen won't kill a disabled person for saying or acting a certain way if they're aware that they're just mentally ill, or something like that. So there are things out there right now that people are pushing towards, like making making sure that these things can be reduced. Um, it's hard to prevent a kidnapping, but
Yeah,
there,
it's just
the efforts are there.
right, and I think that's a great idea about the bracelet, almost like a alert or something bracelet. Like that sounds really great. And even I'm wondering because I know when how they have the help alert when the elderly people fall in their homes, how they can push the button and the ambulance or emergency vehicle come up, it'll someone will talk to them and say, hey, what do you need help with? And they'll say, oh, I need the ambulance, or oh, I need the police, or whatever. I mean, it may be a situation like that where we may need to start passing these things out, trying to get some of these things in rotation for these teenage girls, because something's going on, and like there's no way that many young teenagers are coming up missing in the same area and it's not some type of uh, human trafficking going on or something. Like there's no way that many girls just ran away from home, and I think that, and I just must have to say that I really think that's kind of getting swept under the rug because they are teenagers, and I think some people are just thinking, well, hey, they just ran away from home, they'll show back up, but they're not showing back up, and I don't really see a lot that the government is doing in trying to locate them either, and it's clearly it's got to be some kind of human trafficking going on. Someone's kidnapping these girls and selling them into some type of sex trade or something. Like that many girls from one area can't run away. That just doesn't seem logical to me. It just doesn't. Something is definitely going on, and the fact that the government isn't doing anything about it is crazy to me. Like you don't even want to look into it. Like anyhow, being a political advocate. Now we know that the 2020 elections are coming up pretty soon. Um, and there's a lot of candidates on the ballot. Is there any particular candidate that you feel is stronger than the others, or that you would like to support right now?
So I will say that there are candidates that have a stronger message over other candidates, not individually, but I'll go off of this. I would have if I had it my way, I would ask each one of them individually, do you believe in freedom and justice for all? Right?
Right.
They should say yes. They should say yes. Then from there, I would say, do you think that African Americans who are descendants of those who were enslaved, or African Americans who were at the butt end of being the recipient of negativity of Jim Crow, segregation, etc., black codes, you name it, do you think that they should be given reparations? If they say no, that contradicts them saying that they're for freedom and justice for all. A lot of people say, I didn't have anything to do with slavery. Why should I use my tax dollars to help put towards reparations?
Right.
Well, we didn't have anything to do with the Holocaust,
Right.
but a lot of tax dollars weren't put towards that. We didn't have anything to do with the Japanese encampment, which was horrible that the United States did, and yes, we still paid for that. Native Americans, which they call Indians, they have their own reservations. They've been given codes to be allowed to run casinos and all sorts of things. But when you talk about the ones who, and I say this not as a Pan-Africanist, or not as like I'm pro-black or any of that. I'm just going off of logic. When you're talking about those who have this country, the foundation of it was built on the backs of black slaves, the majority of black slaves.
Right.
There were white indentured servants, there were Native American slaves, there were Irish slaves, there were all, different slaves, but majority, blacks. Built the country, helped build the country, foundation-wise. And here, from the time of, we're talking about 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation, all the way up until now, we just were, as a whole, if we didn't own land, we're given the right to vote not less than 60, 70 years ago,
Right.
And here we are talking about, that was so, not us, but those who are opposed to reparations, that was so long ago, get over it, You know, so I would look for candidates who, at the very least, agree with reparations. If you, because there are candidates who say that they aren't for reparations. Some of those candidates are people's favorite candidates. I heard Bernie Sanders say he's not for reparations. And I'm not trying to single him out. There are other candidates as well, but I just don't see somebody as a potential president for me who isn't for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's how I see the candidates. I'm still waiting, to see who has the strongest message, because it's not only about reparations, obviously.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But if you can't at least agree to that, then I have to rule you out.
Right. I understand. Right, and those are good points to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we never think about that or being told to look at something in a different perspective. That's why we do these sit downs so we can get other people's perspectives on different issues. Also, I want to ask you: are there any projects that you're working on right now?
Yes. So I'm working on potentially implementing a financial literacy curriculum in elementary schools, specifically in the South Central area, South LA. So I'm trying to, I have requested a meeting with Council Member Marquise Harris Dawson. He is the councilman of South Central area, pretty much over where Nipsey Hussle resided, or his place of business was. And I've spoken with his aide, and we talked about pretty much ways that we can actually get this going. So that is the main focus right now. I have other things on top of that, but I want to start with that because we talk about how bad of an economy we have. We talk about how poorly blacks are doing, and what is the solution? What is prevention? The prevention of having a bad economy.
Right.
We get taught all this stuff in elementary, middle school, high school, college. By the time we graduate high school or college, we get our first credit card. We don't even know what to do and how to handle it. So if we were taught that from a young age, when you get your check, you put this much away to savings, you put this much away for your bills, you learn that at the same time you learning how to, I don't think they learn cursive anymore, but when I was in school, we started learning cursive around first, second grade. So if I was to learn financial literacy at the same time that I was learning cursive, I'll be pretty much, I'll probably have $1 million in the bank account right now. You know what I mean? Because I started my first job when I was 14. Right. But all I wanted to do when I was 14 was just spend my money. Like, I got it, I'm going to spend it. Right. It took me later on in life to realize, no, you got to start putting some of this stuff away, because they say it should be on the parents. But in reality, if we are as children spending the majority of our day away from our parents, from 7:30 to 3, by the time we get out, don't let us be in extracurricular activities and stuff like that. We don't leave school till 5 o'clock. Oh, yeah. Our parents get off at 5 o'clock. We got to study. So that's 2-3 hours gone, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mm-hmm. By the time we done with that, we either eating or we already ate and it's almost time for bed, or we watching TV. Ain't nobody sitting around trying to talk about anything after that, because parents tired, children tired from studying, using their mind all day, whether it's listening or output. And so we just have to prevent having a bad economy by inputting the information to the students at an early age. That's what it comes down to. Definitely. Planting the seed early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree, because things that I know now, about investments and money management, not spending, because if you think about it, as a child, you grow up, you watch your parents spend money, but your parents don't sit there in front of you and balance their checkbooks or say, oh, we're putting this much in savings, or we're putting this much in an investment account, or whatever. We don't see that as children. So where else are they going to learn it? They learn everything else in school. So why not teach them the money game, so to speak? It just kind of makes sense.
Especially if y'all going to find me if I don't enroll my child in the school. You know, if
Right,
y'all gonna
exactly.
find me, make me pay more money, then y'all got to teach my child a little bit more than just, you know,
Right.
Christopher Columbus discovered America and stuff like
Right,
that. Like,
exactly. And then a lot, and it's sad because like my daughter, she graduated last year. She's in her first year of college, and the thing I'm noticing that is that a lot of children are coming out with secular education, but they don't really know a whole lot much at all. Like when you ask them things about life, you sit them down, they can't balance a checkbook, or what's a check, how do you write a check. They don't know how to use mobile apps to transfer money between one account and the other. And like I was trying to show her about investments and stocks, and she got so confused. And it's like, why are they not teaching them this in school? Is it? I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like you should probably be teaching. You know, you may have an economics class, but it more. I felt like the economics class that I took in school mainly talked about the economy as far as overall as a nation, but it did not teach you about, hey, you know, if you invest in this, you know, about it didn't teach you about like supply and demand. It didn't
no.
teach you anything about investments, any of that, you know, at all.
So I looked it up on YouTube just to see if there was something out there that was doing this, and I don't know where it was. But there is an elementary school right now. I think they were in the first grade. They have a store in their classroom. Everybody has a specific responsibility, and at the end of each week, each student gets a check based on the amount of work they do. It's a fake check.
Okay.
They get play money. I think they use like Monopoly money or something like that. But they can still buy stuff within that store,
Right.
or they can save and etc. Man, all of these children were talking about uh, economic supply and demand. They were talking about how much of a percentage of their check they were going to put away for savings, what they were going to do with that money, why they were saving, etc. And it was like, dang, this is dope. One problem though, all the students in the class were white, except for like one student. She was like Hawaiian,
Right.
you know. But for the most part, if that were a class of, you know, at least 40% African Americans, now we're talking, you know, because a lot of, and I'm not trying to generalize because not all white students have the opportunity of getting this knowledge either, just like African
Right,
Americans.
of course.
But more obviously, statistics will show that white children are going to be exposed to this information more than your average black
Right. Oh,
child.
for sure, definitely.
So I
And
think
it's sad,
mhm.
right? And it's really sad that you think that your kid is learning all this great stuff in school and they can't even balance a checkbook. And it's like, wow. So where are some social media platforms where people can look you up and get more of you, see more of your views on different political issues?
Okay, so my Facebook is James Elijah Ingram, ElijahIngram, James Elijah Ingram, and my Instagram is _James Ingram, same way, JamesIngram.
It was nice having you, and I really want to thank you. You were a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for doing the interview, and it really was a pleasure having you. And hopefully, we look forward to you doing some great things in the community.
Thank you. Yeah.